Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is a public hearing on a resolution to amend the 2016 to 2020 subdivision staging policy in association with blighted condemned buildings or affordable housing. A Fed committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Monday, June 17th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business, June 13th, so that your views can be included in the material which staff will prepare for the committee's consideration. For everyone scheduled to testify, please bring copies of your written testimony to the clerk at this time. And for this item, we have Jason Santori, Jane Lyons, Bekalech Delaney, Stacy Silber, Noah Fissehazen, sorry if I mispronounce your name, and Goitan Teki. And just so that you know, there is a button at the base of the microphone, and you can turn that to activate your microphone, and then turn it back, press that again to deactivate. So first, we have Jason Sartori.
Thank you. For the record, Jason Sartori. I'm the Acting Division Chief for the Division of Functional Planning and Policy at the Planning Department. I'm here today on behalf of the Planning Board and the Planning Department. Thank you, President Navarro, for the opportunity to speak on the SSP amendment. And also, Chair Anderson sends his regrets that he can't be here personally to testify on this. Although the Planning Board did review the SSP amendment last week, and you should have copies of the Planning Board's comments in your possession. For the most part, the Planning Board concurred with planning staff recommendations, but I did want to highlight a couple of things in particular. First, the use of the term blighted. We felt that this was fairly subjective, a subjective concept. The county code does not identify the criteria for or process by which a structure is officially designated as blighted. However, we did like the use of the term condemned. The code does provide a process through DHCA that for a structure to officially be condemned. As planning staff, if we're reviewing a planning a development application seeking to use this criteria, we can call up DHCA and verify that a structure is condemned, but there's no one for us to call to verify that a structure is officially blighted. With respect to the term previously condemned, we prefer to apply some sort of timeline to that, but didn't want it to be arbitrary. So our concern here was that a property condemned years ago that may have been remediated and is currently serving a productive use, that wouldn't necessarily be the policy priority worthy of a moratorium exception. However, so our recommendation was to add to use the phrase previously condemned and currently vacant, which would help ensure that the structure is still a community concern. Planning staff saw this as a positive amendment, saw it as a good balance between different policy priorities. The Planning Board did decide to go a step further in an attempt to be bold, recognizing that there were limited opportunities to make amendments to the SSP, and recommended that the Council consider applying the 10-student threshold universally to all applications in areas under moratorium. Either way, we do look forward to participating, something to chew on. We look forward to participating in the upcoming work sessions and discussing this further, as well as working with the Council and Council staff as we begin the quadrennial update of the SSP. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Jane Lyons.
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Jane Lyons, Maryland Advocacy Manager for Coalition for Smarter Growth. Coalition for Smarter Growth supports this amendment's efforts to lessen the negative impacts of the moratorium, and we echo the need for affordable housing. Although we ultimately urge the Council to replace the moratorium with policies that better address school construction and housing needs. The 2016 SSP projected that the county would grow by over 200,000 residents between then and 2045. With 14% of land absorbing 76% of new households, and preventing new housing, especially mixed-use, affordable, transit-oriented housing, stifles the ability of the county to meet those future housing needs. Further, it doesn't make sense to punish new homes that the county needs for the future for the impacts that they don't cause. Single-family homes generate almost double the number of students that multifamily homes generate, and school impact taxes paid by new development are more than the total cost of of each projected generated student. So for these reasons, this resolution we see as a first step. However, the stringent requirements of the resolution mean that it might not help as many projects as it could otherwise. Additionally, we also support new housing projects near transit, like Strathmore Square, that are still left in moratorium for another year, putting their financing at risk. There are many alternatives to consider, including first requiring corresponding increases in school facility payments as overcrowding increases, while maintaining the current school impact tax as a base. This would allow new housing, but impose a slightly higher cost to doing so. Second, aligning the timelines of the CIP and annual schools test. Right now, the CIP looks 6 years into the future, and the annual schools test looks 5 years into the future. So that means that if there's a project in the 6th year, I understand that that would mean that that would remedy overcrowding, that school cluster, individual school or cluster could still go into moratorium. Third, tax teardowns more substantially. They don't currently pay impact fees, even though they are new construction and new families moving in generate students. Fourth, exempting metro station policy areas from the school test. Building more homes, especially affordable homes near transit, is necessary for a sustainable future. Fifth, considering redistricting school boundaries. This has the potential to relieve overcrowding and further socioeconomic and racial integration. Sixth, review school design standards. If schools are occupied a smaller footprint and if they can cooperate with nearby parks to take up field space, it might be easier to find new sites for new school construction. And finally, to push forward the SSP effective date to June 2020. The current timeline in November means that this would be after the next annual schools test and could potentially mean yet another year of moratorium. These are our recommendations to consider, but we welcome the Planning Department and Council to offer other alternatives. We believe we can have great schools and plentiful housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's see, Beckeledge Delaney. No. Stacy Silver.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Stacy Silver, an attorney with Lurch, Early & Brewer, and I'm testifying today in favor of the subject subdivision staging policy on behalf of Moonlight Incorporated, the owners of 850 Sligo Avenue. Put simply, this legislation strikes a reasoned balance between facilitating revitalization where needed, or allowing deeply affordable development and managing impacts on area schools. This balancing act is achieved through a finite 10-student generation cap and a restricted set of conditions, which thereby controls application. While this legislation does not solve the overall moratorium issues in the county, it does provide a reasoned, limited approach to address equally important public policies. The property known as 850 Sligo, which was previously condemned, would benefit from this legislation. As background, one of Moonlight's principals lives on Bonifant Street in Silver Spring. He had been observing the continued degradation of the property and decided he wanted to invest locally to revitalize the site with residential redevelopment. Moonlight acquired the property in the spring of 2017. Around this time, the county condemned the property because of the prior owner's lack of maintenance. After acquiring the site, Moonlight took immediate steps to remediate the property, including removing graffiti, replacing broken windows, restoring electricity for safety purposes. In addition to the short-term maintenance, over the course of the last 2 years, Moonlight has invested a considerable amount of resources in having consultants design and entitle 850 Sligo so that it can redevelop as an 85-unit multifamily community. Moonlight worked very closely with its neighbors in the planning of the project and as a result designed a development that mediates between the commercial development along Fenton and Sligo and the more residential feel along Gist. As a result of these efforts, the surrounding community embraced the redevelopment and revitalization. Moonlight wishes to build what is now entitled but is unable to do so because Blair High School is in moratorium. There have been several others prior to Moonlight who had explored redevelopment of this site, and all of the efforts failed for various reasons. The adoption of the SSP is critical to ensure that this well-designed and community-embraced redevelopment is able to proceed. Otherwise, we risk the property sitting vacant and blighted for an indefinite period of time. Because the legislation is very narrow in scope, it helps projects such as 850 Sligo that are small in size and previously condemned. As such, it provides a well-reasoned balance between limiting impacts on area schools and providing the tools to make way for revitalization of blighted sites. We commend the Council on its vision for this bill, and we ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Noah Fisahasian. Goitam Teki. Okay. Please approach the table. Hello, there is a button at the base of the microphone that you can press so that you can start your 3 minutes. There. And if you can lift the microphone so we can hear you. Just lift. Yes. There.
Hello. Good afternoon, President Deborah and Montgomery County Council members. My name is Bakalish Delele. Thank you for allowing me this opportunity to speak to you today. I own a Addis Ababa restaurant located at 8233 Fenton Street, and I'm here to testify in support of the proposed subdivision staging policy amendment. I have lived in the Silver Spring community for a very long time. There is good food everywhere, but Addis Ababa is the capital of Ethiopian cuisine. For 35 years, our restaurant has been where people go for the savory flavor that defines the Ethiopian experience. We prepare fresh and healthy meals and use spices imported directly from Ethiopia. We cook everything accordingly to traditional Ethiopian recipe. Now I would like to address why I support this new legislation. Given the location of our restaurant, we are very excited about this new law that would help run down and unattractive properties get redeveloped with smaller projects. There is one vacant property located very close to Addis Ababa at 850 Sligo Avenue, which is just a 5 minutes walk down Fenton Street. That property has been empty for years. It is indeed for a public policy to allow for its development. This amendment will allow small projects like the one approved for 850 Sligo Avenue to provide a wonderful housing option for our customers and our employees. We believe that many of our customers have children who attend school in our community. I support the limited nature of the law. It creates a good balance between revitalization, of run-down properties while only allowing smaller projects to move forward. If a school is in mortar, before the current owner, several developers were looking at redeveloping 850 Sligo Avenue, but those deals fell through. We do not want that to happen again. We look forward to the transformation of this long vacant building into a beautiful multi-family building. I hope that you share my enthusiasm and also support the amendment. This is something that can help redevelopment in Silver Spring and all over Montgomery.
Thank you so much. We'll consider your written testimony. Thank you very much.
You are.
I don't see any lights. So with that, we are finished and really appreciate all of you coming today to share your thoughts. Thank you. Now we're on to agenda item number 5. This is a public hearing on a resolution to approve a declaration of no further need, disposition of Darnestown Telecommunication Tower. Action is scheduled immediately following this hearing. And we don't have any speakers for this hearing, so this public hearing is closed. And I believe I need a motion. Moved by Councilmember Reamer, second by Councilmember Rice. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so now we're going to proceed to item number 6. This is a public hearing on Bill 10-19, Legislative Branch Economic Impact Statements Amendments. This bill will require the Director of the Office of Legislative Oversight to prepare an economic impact statement for each bill, amend the required contents of an economic impact statement, require an economic impact statement for each bill before it's enacted, and generally amend the law governing enactment of legislation. A GO committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Monday, July 15th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business, July 10th, so that your views can be included in the material which staff will prepare for the committee's consideration. Also, if you would like to follow the progress of a council bill, the council website has a subscribe function. Go to the council's website and use the View Council Records and Legislative Updates link to learn how. And for this item, we have Mr. Michael Coveyou, Gordy Brenn, Marilyn McComb, Laura Tallerico, Michael Friedman, and Tricia Swanson. All right, so we'll begin with Mr. Coveyou.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The executive actually hasn't taken a position on this yet, so we'll be there at the July 15th hearing on this if you have any questions about how we do the economic impact statements now. But for right now, we haven't taken a position. Not sure we're going to take a position on it. Okay.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Gordy Brenn.
Gordy Brenny, Treasurer of the Montgomery County Taxpayers League. I don't believe I can be that brief, but I'll squeeze it in. The Taxpayers League is delighted to have an opportunity to testify on this bill. We have a few qualifications. We applaud the effort to require robust economic analyses for any proposed legislation. The time has come. The bill will help reduce barriers to economic expansion and residents' share of tax burden, we hope. You all know our tax base has been stagnant for years. We also would support a future bill to apply to current laws, which unfortunately add to the cost of doing business and living in our county without offsetting economic benefits. We also hope this bill will apply equally to newer expanded revenue initiatives as well as those that affect operating and capital spending. The key to successful analysis is a consistent methodology, and this should be developed and maintained by OLO. I'll just kind of skip over and condense this point. Clearly, any alternative that has in-house solutions should also be compared and contrasted to outsourcing solutions. There should be guidance on how to include employee legacy costs for any in-house solutions. Capturable cost savings as opposed to cost avoidance needs to be identified and stressed. And finally, we think the bill ought to include post-implementation reviews to see if benefits actually exceed costs and require subsequent amended bills to address shortfalls. Expedited bills, as you know, are not required to have an analysis, but this bill should also require a sunset for those new initiatives pending further review. One other sticking point are the external cost and intangible benefits for some government services or regulations, which some argue are too hard to calculate, to which we say hogwash. It's not only by requiring these analyses that a trail of breadcrumbs is left for those responsible for implementation to follow, but it's the only way to keep the analysis honest. The bill properly requires the description of any variable that could impact estimates, and this will enable an objective evaluation by the council and public. Best analyses are done by the owner of the bill, not OLO. Rather the manager of the service or regulation that must implement the bill. This is because they have to live with the consequences of a post-implementation review. Similarly, council staff, not OLO, should prepare analyses for government bills initiated by the council. OLO can then independently review and score all analyses and perform post-implementation reviews. To assure accountability, the bill should require that impact analyses be reflected in the performance metrics for any contracts awarded to implement the bills above a certain amount, and contracts included in appropriation bills as well. For those in-house solutions, the bill should require impact analysis be incorporated in their performance metrics for agencies and departments. And with that, I end my testimony. It took more than 10 seconds.
Thank you so much. Marilyn Balcom.
Madam President, council members, my name is Marilyn Balcom. I'm the president and CEO of the Gaithersburg Germantown Chamber of Commerce. We support Bill 1019, requiring the council to evaluate the direct impact proposed legislation might have on the local economy. This is something that my members have been suggesting for many years. Business owners often feel left out of the legislative discussion. It's very difficult for most business owners to step away from their businesses to participate in the process. When bills are introduced, members of the business community have tried to convey, either directly or through their chamber representatives, the impact legislation would have on their business. They would often come away from the process feeling unheard. I can't count the number of times that I've heard from you or your colleagues, "We never hear from businesses, we only hear from the chambers." This bill provides an independent assessment of the potential impact legislation could have on individual businesses and the general economy. The nature of this bill basically says, let's stop for a minute and make sure that there aren't any unintended consequences and make sure that everyone's interest has been considered. This bill provides a critical data point that can't be discounted during the decision process. A great example would be Bill 1219, which we'll be discussing next week. We contend that Bill 1219 would have far-reaching impact on the local economy. Once enacted, this bill, 1019, would provide independent data to help move that discussion forward. As with most legislation, implementation is key. I could envision a time when the Office of Legislative Oversight might look at a bill and determine that it would be very difficult and or costly to determine to quantify the impact on the economy. I totally get that. That's exactly what we've been saying all along. Laws can have complex, far-reaching effects, intended or otherwise. I suggest that when a bill is too complicated to assess, that's exactly the time that we need to dig a little deeper and to make sure that we understand what a bill might do or not do. Each of you have talked about conveying the message that Montgomery County is a great place to do business. This legislation is a great start, and the chambers can be great partners in supporting this process. Thank you to the sponsors of the bill, and I encourage everyone to vote in favor of Bill 1019. And I look forward to working with you to make sure that the best available data is there to make decisions. So thank you.
Thank you. Laura Tallarico? Press that button.
Good afternoon, council members. Laura Tallarico here on behalf of the Land Use and Zoning Practice Group of Linoes and Blocker. We support Bill 10-19's identified goal of affording the County Council a more complete analysis and understanding of the economic impacts of pending legislation. Chiefly, the bill specifically delineates the effects that must be analyzed in an EIS, providing the County Council a full view of the potential economic outcomes prior to action on the legislation. Additionally, Bill 10-19 makes an EIS a required step prior to the approval of most bills, with only expedited bills permitted to bypass the process. Bill 10-19 clarifies that an EIS must include the effects on the private sector by more specifically stating the required contents of an EIS. County Code Section 2-81BD currently requires that an EIS include the bill's positive or negative effects, if any, on employment, spending, savings, investment, incomes, and property values in the county. These categories lack any specificity or clarity. Bill 10-19 would require an EIS to include the bill's potential positive or negative effects, if any, on the county's workforce, taxation policy, property values, incomes, operating costs to businesses and nonprofits operating in the county, capital investment from the private sector, economic development, and the county's competitiveness. These more specific categories instruct the preparer of an EIS to consider the full range of economic impacts on pending legislation. As such, this bill is an important step in recognizing that the health of the county's private sector is crucial to the overall health of the county. Bill 10-19 also makes an EIS a required step for the approval of most legislation. County Code 2-81BE currently provides that a bill is not invalid simply because it is not subject to the EIS process. As a result, the County Code's current EIS provisions lack teeth. Bill 10-19 would allow an expedited bill to remain valid, but not a bill that is not designated as an expedited bill if the EIS requirements are not met. This change recognizes the importance of the information contained in the new, more robust EIS. While approval of Bill 10-19 is an important first step toward developing a more complete picture of the economic impacts of proposed legislation, the bill does not guarantee that the County Council takes into consideration the contents of the EIS. The county is facing a number of challenges, from the recently concluded budgetary process to school construction funding to a strong and laudable desire to provide a social safety net for residents. It is vital that the County Council recognize a vibrant private sector contributes to the county's overall goals and that each piece of legislation, no matter how well-intentioned, must be considered in light of the broader economic impacts. In closing, we urge the County Council to approve Bill 10-19 and to give consideration to the information that will be included in the new EIS analysis made possible by this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Friedman.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Friedman, and I'm here on behalf of the Montgomery County Group of Sierra Club to support Bill 1019 with proposed suggestions to expand the scope of the bill. We agree with the underlying rationale of Bill 1019. It's important not just to look at the explicit rationale of a bill, but to look at its ripple effects, its unintended consequences, particularly when they affect important values, goals, and commitments of the county. But beyond economic parameters, there is another critical goal of this county, which involves averting potentially devastating consequences. As you know, the county unanimously passed a resolution in 2017, quote, to use all available powers and resources to restore a safe climate and build a sustainable economy. In Sierra Club's view, the county's declared commitment to climate safety means that proposed legislation must also be evaluated for its climate impact. To require evaluation of proposed legislation solely in terms of economic parameters without also reviewing consequences for the climate could lead to undermining the county's climate commitment, because some kinds of economic activity would make the already dire climate crisis worse. Moreover, and it's important that really a proper assessment of the medium and long-term economic consequences of legislation requires taking into account impacts on the climate, because this county will face high costs for dealing with mitigation and resiliency. So we need to know the consequences for the climate in advance of addressing the legislation. To truly assess economic impact, Bill 1019 should also encompass an evaluation of climate impacts. Thank you.
Tricia Swanson.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Tricia Swanson, and I am Vice President of Government Relations at the Montgomery County Chamber of Commerce, and we are here in support of Bill 1019. The Chamber appreciates the amount of focus that this council has placed on economic development, specifically in the last 6 months. This bill continues on that theme in its requirement that every piece of legislation be given an economic impact analysis. The requirement for this analysis be done ensures that impacts on all stakeholders are considered. Continuing, it will also help the public better understand all intended and unintended consequences of legislation. Finally, and importantly, this legislation brings Montgomery County in line with what the state does, which requires a detailed fiscal note for every bill that's introduced. The Chamber commends Councilmember Friedson and the co-sponsors of this legislation, which will ensure policies are created with the economic competitiveness of the county in mind. Thank you.
Thank you so much. All right. Our next group is Nicola Whiteman, Andy Stern, and Jane Whitaker. All right. Start with Nicola Whiteman.
Good afternoon, council members and staff. I am Nicola Whiteman, the Senior Vice President of Government Affairs for AOBA, and I am certainly pleased to testify today in support of Bill 1019. Understanding the full economic impacts, including to the private sector, of legislative and regulatory proposals, and not just the fiscal impact to the county, is just good public policy. Analyzing a bill's potential effect on tax policy, property values, and the operating costs of businesses, including, for example, from bills such as Bill 1219, could help ensure that a policy proposal does not, for example, undermine the county's economic development goals by discouraging necessary business investment in the county. We must understand, for example, the effects of a proposal on the cost of producing new and preserving existing housing, which has implications for achieving the county's stated affordable housing goals. Additionally, the county's commercial office buildings continue to struggle with many facing high vacancy rates that create the risk of declining property values and tax revenues. The proposal before you today will help inform discussions on proposals that can contribute to a healthy office market and, by extension, a healthy Montgomery economy. Operating expenses is a key factor in a tenant's consideration of where to locate. Given the current economic climate, the measure will help the county further develop policies that enhance its competitive position in the region. We know that Montgomery County is not an island and that neighboring jurisdictions are aggressively working to attract new residents and businesses. However, with sound and balanced policies such as Bill 1019, many can and will continue to choose Montgomery County as a place to work, live, and play. I look forward, along with AOBA, to continue working with the county as a key private partner on ensuring the county's long-term economic viability. We can and should work together to develop county tax and regulatory policies that are supportive of business attraction and expansion. Thank you for the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Andy Stern.
Good afternoon. I'm Andy Stern, Chair-elect of the Greater Bethesda Chamber of Commerce and President of Andy Stern's Office Furniture, a small business located in Rockville, Maryland. Our chamber represents more than 550 members, the majority of which are small businesses with less than 10 employees. As you may know, this evening is the 93rd installation and awards dinner for our chamber. Hope to see everyone there. This has to be one of the easiest bills to testify on because the entire county council are sponsors. For that, we thank Councilmember Friedson for his leadership on this bill and the open-mindedness of the entire county council for co-sponsoring it. For the last 5+ years, our chambers had the following statement at the beginning of our Montgomery County advocacy agenda, quote, fiscal impact analysis, mandatory, required by law, in-depth, meaningful, transparent, and timely analysis of the cost of compliance and fiscal impact on regulated parties prior to adoption of all proposed county legislation and executive regulations and orders, end quote. So over the years, we have discussed this proposal with members of the county council and the former county executive to no avail. Various reasons were given. Finally, our voices, that of all the chambers and business organizations in this county, have been heard. It's great when council members understand the fiscal impact on the county government. That is, of course, due diligence, but just as important is the impact on those you're about to regulate. And one more request we have. We would ask that you not pass any more bills that would have a negative fiscal impact on business before doing a full analysis, especially Bill 1219. This is a perfect example of well-intentioned legislation that may have unintended negative consequences for employees and employers. Thank you for support of this bill, and we look forward to working with you as you implement this legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Jane Whitaker.
Council President Navarro, members of the council, good afternoon. I'm Jane Rediker, President of the Greater Silver Spring Chamber of Commerce. I come before you today in enthusiastic support of Bill 1019. We, like other chambers, have advocated for this for many, many years now. We have wanted to require the council and the executive branch to enact no new laws or regulations without first conducting, publishing, and considering a full analysis of its impact on the county's economy, as well as the economic impact and cost of compliance on businesses and nonprofits. While most legislation is well-intentioned, the results are sometimes unintended consequences that hurt our economy and hurt our businesses and have an opposite effect that is desired. We fully support moving the responsibility for preparing an economic analysis to OLO. We've worked with the OLO, we trust them, and we know that they're qualified to provide the economic analysis and the kind of information that the council needs to make a good decision based on a broad array of factors. We fully support Bill 1019's requirement that an analysis of legislation's positive or negative effects, if any, on the council's workforce, taxation policy, and especially on property values, incomes, operating costs to businesses and nonprofits operating in the county, capital investment from the private sector, economic development, and the county's competitiveness. As we've often said, a vibrant economy is key to the county's success and the key to the county's ability to provide the kind of services that our residents have come to expect. This bill is a great step in that direction. And that's why we think that it's important that you move forward with this. We thank Councilmember Friedson for taking the lead, and we thank all of you for having the foresight and having the courage to step up and support this bill. And we are looking forward to working with you on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I just want to quickly thank everybody for coming and supporting, for everything that you do to grow our economy. This is just about us analyzing what the impacts of our decisions will make on the economy, but you and your members and the organizations and individuals and residents that you're here representing really are what makes the economy work and what provides us with the resources we need to do the services that our residents rely on. So thank you for that. And to Mr. Stern, I will be there. I look forward to inducting you as the new chair of the Greater Bethesda Chamber, and I promised that I committed to that before I saw that he was coming in to support my legislation. Thank you, everybody.
Let the record reflect that. All right. Okay, so now we're on to thank you so much, item 7. And this is a public hearing on Bill 11-19, Administration, Internal Audit, Inspector General Amendments. This bill would increase the legislative oversight of the county's internal accounting and contracting processes, modify the duties of the Office of Internal Audit, expand the duties and authority of the Inspector General, and generally amend the law governing the Office of Internal Audit and the Inspector General. A GO committee work session is tentatively scheduled for Monday, July 15th. Persons wishing to submit additional material for the council's consideration should do so before the close of business July 10th so that your views can be included in the material which staff will prepare for the committee's consideration. And for this item, we have Mr. Bill Brogley.
Good afternoon, Council President and Council members. My name is Bill Brogley, and I am the county's internal audit manager. It is a pleasure for me to appear before you on behalf of the county executive and to offer comments on Bill 1119, which amends Chapter 2, Administration of the Montgomery County Code. The proposed bill makes several amendments to the functions of the Office of Internal Audit and the duties of the Inspector General. The county executive supports taking additional steps to build on our collective lessons learned and making explicit through Bill 1119 specific responsibilities of the Office of Internal Audit and the Inspector General, while ensuring we balance the benefits of increased oversight against the additional cost of these added responsibilities and the likely availability of increased resources within our collective fiscal reality. The executive branch has developed suggested modifications to the bill that we believe will strike a reasonable balance between the benefits of increased oversight and transparency with the costs associated with strengthening these offices. Specifically, the Chief Administrative Officer plans to establish a Risk Governance Committee. This committee would be chaired by the Deputy CAO and would include the Directors of Finance, OMB, and Procurement, the County Attorney, as well as the Internal Audit Manager. The committee would be responsible for overseeing management of the system of internal controls within county government, including approving annual internal audit plans and resource levels, reviewing the results of risk assessments and specific internal control reviews, and reviewing progress on implementation of corrective actions. The Council should consider amending Bill 1119 to implement through law the CAO's planned oversight structure. Given the increasing demand on county resources, the Council should also consider adding language to Bill 1119 that would clarify that the Office of Internal Audit should conduct risk analyses on a periodic basis and in coordination with the Inspector General. The bill should also require the Office of Internal Audit to conduct follow-on internal control audits based on the results of the periodic risk analyses. These targeted internal controls will ensure that each department and principal office are audited on a regular basis. Assessment of risk and conduct of targeted audits based on this assessment are consistent with the duties of the county executive set forth in county charter. We would also support revisions to the bill that would clarify the Inspector General's duties with respect to oversight and review of county programs and contracts. Executive staff looks forward to working with the Council and the Inspector General on language that addresses the interests of the Council in a cost-effective manner. Thank you, and I'm pleased to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. I don't see any lights, so we really thank you for coming over today to share your views. Thank you. All right, so now we're going to move to item 8. These are interviews for Montgomery County Planning Board. The council received 24 applications to fill the 2 vacancies on the Montgomery County Planning Board. 7 top-ranked applicants were selected for interviews. Applicants were advised that the council will designate a new chair in conjunction with the appointment process by designating either an appointee or another sitting board member to be the chair. If a current member of the board is selected as chair, both of the new appointee will serve as board members. All applicants were asked whether they were interested in serving as chair only, board member only, or whether they were interested in either position, and the responses are noted below in your packet. As you know, the Land Use Article of the Annotated Code of Maryland requires that no more than 3 members of the planning board be from the same political party. Members serve 4-year terms and are limited by state law to 2 full terms. Mr. Anderson is eligible to reapply as chair. Members of the planning board may continue to serve until their successors are appointed and have qualified. The current board members are Casey Anderson, Democrat, Chair, Norman Dreyfus, Republican, Natalie Fanny Gonzalez, Democrat, Gerald Sicci, Republican, and Tina Patterson, unaffiliated. The following applicants will be interviewed beginning today. First, we will interview Mr. Casey Anderson, Democrat as Chair, and Mr. Julian Hafner, Democrat as member. On Thursday, June 13th, in the morning, we will interview Mr. William Kerwin, Democrat, and Mr. Charles Kaufman, Democrat. And in the afternoon, we will interview Ms. Jennifer Russell, Democrat, Partap Verma, Democrat, and Brandy Brooks, Democrat. So with that, we will begin with Mr. Casey Anderson. Good afternoon.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Sure. So, Mr. Anderson, I do have a series of questions that are pretty pro forma, but then we will open it up to questions from my colleagues or comments, and we'll engage in a dialogue, and then you'll have an opportunity for any closing remarks that you wish to express. Okay? So we'll begin with number 1 is, what do you feel is the most important accomplishment during your tenure as chair? Is there anything you would do differently during an additional term?
Thank you so much for the opportunity to interview, and I also wanted to say what a privilege it's been to serve in this capacity. And I've really enjoyed and been very rewarded by the opportunity to work with all of you, as well as with Planning and Parks Department staff and with the community to strengthen every neighborhood in Montgomery County. I would say that the project with which I'm probably going to be most closely associated is the Bethesda Downtown Plan. Not because it's the most important thing that we've done in the last few years, but because we tried some very unconventional approaches to allocation of density, created a new revenue stream for the acquisition of new parks, which has been very successful so far. In fact, exceeded all of our expectations, and I think really represents innovation in the best sense and in the best tradition of our agency and of this county. I would say that more important are some of the plans, for example, the Montgomery Village Plan, the White Oak Plan, which represent the foundation for revitalization of communities that have not received as much public or private investment in recent decades. And I'm very proud of the work that we've done to lay the groundwork for some fresh investment in those communities to improve the quality of life in places that, frankly, have been neglected over in recent years. I would say that as for the Parks Department, I am very excited about the direction that we have taken in encouraging the acquisition and development of more urban parks, improvement of management of our athletic field inventory, as well as athletic fields for Montgomery County Public Schools. So we now we own a little over 300 parks and are managing over 200 parks for the schools. Eventually, we hope to take on all of the elementary and middle school parks with support from all of you for the money to renovate those, and that will make us one of the largest operators, managers of athletic fields in the entire country, which makes it possible for us to achieve economies of scale and apply some really sophisticated management techniques to minimize the use of artificial turf and really maximize the availability of those recreational facilities, which are so important not only for physical fitness but also for community building. I would say that the other issues on which I am most proud of being involved include the school system, the debate over transportation, the SSP that we developed, which is together, which is one of the most progressive set of transportation rules in the entire country, really encourages transit, biking, and walking to be included and measured and taken seriously as part of our traffic rules. And as to the schools, that we have developed working relationships that I think are much more intensive, productive, and constructive than had been true before I started in this role. In the future, I would hope that we would reinforce our emphasis on 3 areas, and they have been identified as the pillars of the upcoming general plan work, those being equity, sustainability, and economic development. I think that in the past we've thought about those issues as needing to be in balance, but I think in the future we need to find ways to make those mutually reinforcing. So it's not just a question of making sure that none of those 3 are neglected, but ideally making sure that they all work together and are complementary, and because we really face serious challenges in climate change and environmental sustainability, competitiveness with other parts of the region and the country for jobs and economic opportunity, and as all of you were discussing this morning, the increased awareness of the need to focus on equity. And none of those things can afford to be left by the wayside. So I would hope that if I'm fortunate enough to be reappointed, that those would be the foundation of the next 4 years of our work at MNC PPC and cooperatively with all of you.
What societal changes are most likely to impact land use, and how should we respond? For example, what changes we make and how we zone for retail, since online shopping is changing the nature and demand for in-store shopping. So in terms of those kinds of forces, what are your observations?
I think that we need to expect change, but not to be too sure that we know what that change will look like. Our retail study, which was conducted a little over a year ago, showed that we probably are not overbuilt in retail. Other parts of the D.C. region, other jurisdictions have too much retail space. Our issue is that we don't have quite the right kind of retail. We have a surplus of space for national retailers that sell things like apparel, shoes, bicycles. Bookstores are obviously pretty much gone out of style. The type of neighborhood serving retail, though, hardware stores, dry cleaners, those sorts of retailers actually need more space. So in some ways that's good news for us, because we don't have the huge overhang and excess of retail space that other places, other parts of the country and the region are dealing with, but it's nonetheless challenging. I was talking to a prominent developer in the county recently who's been involved in a lot of mixed-use developments, who was telling me that the challenge that they face in developing apartment buildings, for example, with retail on the ground floor, which is a basic part of the bread and butter of mixed-use development, that their struggle is the recognition that the life cycle usefulness of an apartment building is probably at least 30, 40, 50 years. A retail concept that's successful may only last 5 or 10 years. And you need to be able to construct buildings, to plan real estate development that will accommodate change on the ground level of that structure, even as you maintain the whatever's built upstairs. So I think that we have taken steps to address that by being very flexible in our zoning code and the CR family of zones, not trying to be overly prescriptive or predict exactly what the market will demand in 5 or 10 or 20 years. But at the same time, I think we need to focus on the need to attract office employment, make sure that our land use regulatory program is working in harmony with the county's economic development objectives. Obviously that means jobs, but it also means providing the types of housing that people can afford and that the workforce will need to fill those jobs and continue to make this a prosperous place. The one other thing I'd say on this subject is, we've been talking a little bit about the general plan, and I think we've even shown you some of the graphics what some that were in the 1964 plan. And you see those people flying around on hovercraft, like it looks like storyboards from the Jetsons or Buck Rogers in the 25th century. And I view that as a cautionary tale. The 1964 plan was a visionary document. It's had continued vitality over 5 decades. Really amazing in some ways how it's maintained its relevance. And yet, on something like the basic question of how are we going to get around in 30 or 40 or 50 years, it missed the mark completely. And that's what I mean when I say that we shouldn't be too sure that we know exactly where things are headed. There's a lot of discussion right now about autonomous vehicles. I certainly believe that autonomous vehicles will be a more important factor in transportation. It will also influence things like parking and other aspects of land use. Automation and robotics are going to change the nature of work and change the need for not only how much office space, but what kind of office space or other workspace is needed. But I think that we need to be have an appropriate degree of humility about how much we can predict the future and make sure that we're prepared to adapt whichever direction things go with the market or technology or other factors.
So I think that you just described a lot of the particular policy area as well as trends that we all have to grapple with. So can you share how do you balance all of this? Because your particular position, as chair, is really critical in terms of not just economic development, sustainability, but also this notion of how are you working strategically to include all the voices of this extraordinary county of 1 million residents, right? And so when you talk about this 1964 general plan, I'm thinking about also the extraordinary demographic changes, both in terms of aging population, but also, our diversity, right? That in that time, perhaps there was not necessarily an understanding of how things were going to shift so rapidly. So your job is to take into consideration all these policy and all these trends, but also making sure that the voices of all residents in the county who will be affected by the decisions that we all make around land use are incorporated. How do you balance all of that, and where do you seek, information that will guide you in this very, important charge of keeping all of that balanced and staying true to, again, who we are today, 2019 Montgomery County?
Since I've been on the planning board, I think that the Parks Department and the planning board have taken some significant steps to incorporate equity, diversity, and outreach to the whole range of affected interests that were not true as recently as a few years ago. I think that our work on affordable housing, for example, when we reformed the MPDU law last year, Councilman Reamer alluded to the relationship of the ADU proposal to some of those issues, and generally awareness that we want to have mixed income neighborhoods that are racially, socially, and economically diverse, and how that benefits all of us. It is a social justice issue. It's also a transportation issue. It's also an education issue. It's also an economic development issue. And I think that we have made some steps forward in the housing area to address that. I think there was some discussion earlier this morning also about the relationship between access to transportation and equity. And I'm very proud of my role in the BRT task force and the master plan that emerged from that. I think one of the most important things we can do for affordable housing and to improve access to jobs and other amenities that are important to quality of life without gentrification and displacement is to expand the range of transportation options that people have in neighborhoods that are already affordable but lack access to some of those things that other parts of the county already enjoy. I think that we've also taken some steps, and I think to get more directly to your question about how can we gather information that will be relevant to this sort of analysis and discussion in the future. As part of the bicycle master plan, as part of the urban parks master plan, the energizing public spaces plan that we did last year and then earlier this year, the Aspen Hill Vision Zero study, the Germantown Boyd's Mark Station plan, all those plans not only focused attention on safety for biking, walking, and for transit users in some areas of the county that have not received appropriate investments in that sort of infrastructure so people can walk safely to the bus stop or to school, for example. But they also incorporated really cutting-edge tools to collect and apply data so we can see where are the opportunities to add sidewalks, add crosswalks, add stoplights, slow down the speed limit, create bicycling infrastructure, add transit service that are not only going to get us the most bang for the buck, but can address some of those equity issues in a very targeted and intentional way. And I think that our agency has a crucial role to play for the whole county because our research group provides a lot of the data collection and analysis that informs the executive branch agency's work and also the work of the county council. And so I think that I would look forward to expanding the use of those tools and the engagement of our agency with the other parts of county government to assist in their analysis, your analysis of how can we bear down on these issues of equity in a very systematic and rigorous way.
So just to follow up on that, so how do you find that kind of guidance or information? Where do you seek, where do you get that information? I will submit to you that unfortunately, I think many times when we talk about demographic changes or our diversity, we immediately go to this place of thinking that it's about, affordable housing, lack of access to transportation, issues of net equity. It almost comes from this deficit perspective, when in reality, especially in land use, right? Many immigrants, for example, would be very much interested in seeing maybe more density. They may be very interested in seeing how to push forward economic development. So what I want to make sure, and again, this is especially important in planning, is that we don't automatically, when we talk about diversity, think about all of these disparities, but that we are also just being absolutely proactive in incorporating all the voices in the county to further our ultimate goals that are shared by people who might live in Bethesda. It's the same exact interest that people might have who live in Wheaton, who live in Briggs Cheney, correct? So how are you guided? And because to me, again, land use is so important. How are you getting the sort of guidance? How do you seek the information? Where do you get that in order to be able to incorporate the voices, not only under the rubric of equity, but under the rubric of this is who we are today. It takes everybody in order for us to achieve these important goals, authentically respecting and incorporating all the voices. Where do you go to get that kind of guidance that then you can set forth as the leader of this very important agency?
Well, first let me say that I completely agree that we shouldn't presume that some communities don't need or want some of the same things that the more privileged communities have enjoyed. I think that your role, Council President, particularly in the White Flint 2 plan, where you had come to some Fed committee sessions and really made the point that there should be an opportunity to redevelop some of the industrial properties in White Flint 2 in a way that would facilitate that the area sort of on the eastern side of that White Flint planning area that was not really the center of the upscale development in the past, that those neighborhoods would appreciate and value the opportunity to get some of those types of retail amenities as well. And I really appreciated your role in that plan. And I know that you've spoken up on several occasions to similar effect. But I want to address your question directly about where you get information. I think that we have to meet people where they are, and the planning department has adopted some experimental tactics to try to see what works and what doesn't. For example, in the Veers Mill plan, I know you're aware that Commissioner Fanny Gonzalez was jumping on ride-on buses in the Veers Mill corridor, talking to people, intercepting them as they were getting on and off the bus. So you weren't just relying on people who were going to come to a public meeting. Last weekend, I was at the Panera in the Aspen Hill Shopping Center talking to people about what kind of improvements in pedestrian safety they would like to see as they're coming in and out of the door getting coffee. So I think there's a lot of shoe leather that's involved to go out into the community and meet people where they are. There's also some things that we can do that don't necessarily rely on ever talking to somebody face to face. Ideally, we'd love to be able to talk to everybody, have individualized conversations, but one of the things we did in the Veers Mill plan was to put advertisements on bus shelters that said, tell us what you're interested in, tell us what you're concerns about this neighborhood. You can text us at this number. So even people that don't even, and that's a cross-cultural thing, some people don't want to be, they don't want to take time out of their coffee break or their bus ride to talk to a planner, but if they're standing there waiting for the bus, they might be willing to text you a short message about some of the things that concern them. So I don't think there's any one answer, and I don't think it's any one person or agency's responsibility to do this kind of outreach. I think we all have to take responsibility for working as hard as we can, and sometimes it is a matter of experimenting and seeing what works, accepting the fact that some of those efforts might not be successful, and that's okay. If they don't work, we'll try something else, and we'll continue to work as hard as we can to be as inclusive as possible. The last thing I'd say about this is that I am proud of the way that I have run the planning board's processes. We do not limit people's ability to speak. Everybody who shows up to speak on an item can speak, and I try very hard not to cut them off or limit their time. I know that you all want to hear from your constituents, but sometimes there are limits in terms of how many people you can accommodate, and you have to limit people to 3 minutes. And so I view part of our responsibility at the planning board for items that are going to come to the county council is to make sure, because we have the luxury of more time, to let people air out their views at whatever length is necessary to get their point across, so we can narrow the issues that you have to consider and frame those issues for discussion and make sure that we have an open and transparent process.
Thank you. So there are many pressing issues that are regional in nature: transportation networks, economic growth, affordable housing, to name a few. How would you position the planning board to work on these larger regional issues?
I'd say that my pet peeve is the fixation on Northern Virginia as the one and only competitor or job center that we need to be thinking about. I would not deny that Tyson's Corner and Dulles Airport are important to our economic future, but there's a big region out there. There's a major center of life sciences employment in Baltimore with Johns Hopkins. There's a major federal government investment in bioweapons and defense at Fort Detrick, and cryptography and related technologies at Fort Meade, just up the road. The Purple Line is going to tie us into northern Prince George's County and to the University of Maryland in a way I think is tremendously exciting. It's probably the most underrated benefit of the Purple Line is that it physically integrates the state's flagship research university into our community and into our economic ecosystem. So I think that the main point I'd like to drive home is the idea that, yes, we need to think about competing with Fairfax County and Tyson's in Northern Virginia. We also need to think about competing with D.C. and Prince George's and Howard County and Baltimore, and not to mention Silicon Valley, Boston, Massachusetts, Raleigh, North Carolina, and all the other places that would like to attract life sciences jobs, technology jobs, some of those jobs in highly paid sectors that we would like to attract. I think that we also have an opportunity to cooperate with some of those competitors in ways that we haven't before. But the first thing we need to do is think about the economic geography of the region and how we fit into it, and it's not all just about what's going on across the river in Virginia.
Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware?
No.
All right, so now we're going to turn it over to colleagues for a conversation. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Anderson, in serving as chair and for some reason wishing to do it again. A little bit confused by that. You're a very smart man. Let me just say, as the District 2 representative, I'm very concerned about the challenges that we still face in the Up County, as I know you're aware. And just wanted to get your vision, because in the Up County region, even there, we still have a diversity. A place like Germantown that has potential for great economic growth. in that area that has a lot of residential but does not have the retail, and is not beneficial to see some of the growth that even an area like Rockville, while incorporated, but still has significantly less residents than Germantown does. So there's so much potential that's there versus an area like Montgomery Village that I represent that has been stagnant in terms of any economic growth until just recently with Bloom. But then also when you look at residential that is affordable, but is very old and is certainly not up to par with the specs that we'd like to see for some of our residents to live in. And then an area like Damascus, a historic area to where we've seen not a lot of economic development, but not a lot of want or need for that economic development. But we know that when those areas don't have it, they start to stagnate as well. So if you could just talk overall about some of those up-county regions and what your vision is and what you think would be a catalyst for us to be successful. And this is something, Madam President, that I think I'm going to ask of every single one of the planning board candidates, because I think it's incredibly important to my district.
Yeah, thank you for that question. And I've said many times that I'm very bullish on Germantown in particular. I think the community, it's not just that it has potential, it's already a pretty great place. It's frustrating to see that some of the office development that was expected in the 90s and early part of the 2000s has not emerged. I think we're all aware of the bigger picture issues, the structural changes in the economy, a shift in market preference for where office employment is located that have contributed to that. But I'm not pessimistic in the least. I think it was great to see Topgolf get approved. I think that will be a draw. The park assets at South Germantown are amazing, and I think are an economic development asset for the county that's often overlooked. And I think really that even the office employment will emerge over time, although it's not as quickly as we'd hope for. As to helping support the up-county more generally, I was very glad to have the council's support in adding to our work program a study of transit in the upper 270 corridor. And we're obviously talking to the state about the Managed Lanes project, but I think it's essential that we synthesize all of the strands of transit projects that are some are existing, some are actually providing service, like WMATA buses, ride-on buses, the limited MARC services available. Others are in some stage of planning, like the CCT or the Upper 355 BRT projects. Some are speculative, like the proposal for monorail. But I think that we need to integrate all those things and figure out what makes sense so we can have a comprehensive set of ideas that can be implemented in the short, medium, and longer term for the up-county, and that will support economic development as well as mobility needs of people in Clarksburg, Germantown, and down into at least to Shady Grove, and really further south on the 355 corridor.
Mr. Anderson, let me just say that I really want to thank you for continuing to be a collaborative partner. You and I have not agreed on everything, and I think that's incredibly important to acknowledge. However, I do appreciate the fact that you have always explained your position. I understood exactly where you were going. You were able to clearly articulate that, and that's incredibly important for a chair. To be able to not be a yes man, but to be a person who really is striving to achieve what you think is going to be best in moving this community forward, while also understanding and being receptive to a lot of the thoughts and ideas that we have representing that same constituency. So I really appreciate the partnership, and I hopefully look forward to working with you in the future in the position as chair.
Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President, and thank you, Mr. Anderson, for reapplying for this position. You know, being the person to be the first one to sit and get for an interview, and you know it's being televised, so everybody else gets to sort of hear your answers and can play off of that is really at times not the most enviable position to be in, especially when there's a competition. But, and you've already listed, and I was going to ask, Craig said he was going to ask this question of others as well. I'm planning to do this as well. But you've already listed the accomplishments in many cases that you've been through for Montgomery County, and many of them obviously should be applauded. But I've always learned that you can sort of, and I don't want to use the word failure, but if you had to do it over again, what would you have done differently in a case or two?
Well, I don't know that I would do anything differently in the sense of not doing a plan or recommending something that's substantially different than what was ultimately approved by the county council. But I do think there are some frustrations, and if for lack of a better term, real estate development and public infrastructure gets built not on the time frame of days or weeks or months, but years. And it's frustrating to see, and again, to Councilmember Navarro's point about reinvestment in neighborhoods that really want it and need it. It's frustrating to see Glenmont not moving forward more quickly with the shopping center. And we don't need to get into the whys and wherefores of that. I think that's been covered at other times, and we all know some of the reasons for that. It is good to see Privacy World, for example, getting redeveloped, and the interchange finally getting done, so that can clear the way for some things to happen there. But really, I think to the extent that I have regrets, it's that some of the things where we've laid the groundwork, we haven't had any takers, and that's the nature of this job. We can allow certain things, but we can prohibit other things, but we can't make anybody build anything or do anything. And that's not just true of private property owners, but we can't make the State Highway Administration build a road, or the State Transit Administration, or even the county government build a transit way. So it's great to see finally the Purple Line moving forward, and I'm hoping that a couple of these BRT routes will be constructed during this council term and during this county executive's term. But really, to the extent that I have things that I look back on and that disappoint me, they're those sort of projects that I think really would be great, that we want to see happen. To speak to Germantown, the project up off of Century that Lerner has, we'd love to see that move forward. There are a number of these things that would really be in the public interest, and for a variety of reasons, because there's no market or there's no public money available, we can't move forward as quickly. And pedestrian safety is another example as well. There are communities where we've identified places that really need some help with things just as simple as a crosswalk or a sidewalk, and yet we find that the money is so tight that even those simple steps turn out to take a lot longer than they should.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that answer. As was mentioned earlier, as an example for retail, the world has changed dramatically. In some cases, even after something is done, it might have been done to the best degree that it can be done at that time, but the market changed, so therefore you have to redo it or relook at it. So I thank you for all that you do, and I look forward to working with you.
Councilmember Reamer.
Chairman Anderson, really appreciate your terrific work in your 2 terms thus far. You've been at the helm of the board as the board has undertaken some sweeping revisions to the county's land use and transportation strategy, and we've rezoned the entire west side of the county, all the Purple Line corridors. We have taken it on in a big way, and now we are poised to take on the general plan, and I can't think of anyone more suited to lead the board through that process and the community deliberation of that process than you. You've been here at every step of the way working towards this this kind of bigger picture item. So I'm really strongly supportive of your candidacy. I think you've done a terrific job. I think you demonstrated today. Just there's hundreds of layers of complexity to the work that you do, and you know each one of those layers. You know the entry points. You know the what's behind it, the substance, the nuances, and that's really helpful in someone who's taking the chair position or continuing to serve in the chair position. So I'm pleased that we're going to be able to bring in some new blood to to the board. We're making a different appointment, and I hope that the council will also get someone who is as thoughtful and substantive as you have been, and look forward to continuing to serve with you. I am very confident the council supports you. I don't want to speak for others, but I look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Councilmember Friedson.
Thank you, and appreciate your willingness to serve again and your service thus far and the collaborative partnership that you and the board have with the council. I have a question for you, and I'll be asking this question to everybody. If you had a magic wand and you could make any change in the county, what would it be?
Be very careful how you answer that.
For the millions watching at home, as
Wow.
Councilmember Giwando would say.
Yeah, well, I really think that the issue of the social and racial integration of the county is really the issue that looms over almost everything, and that affects schools, that affects jobs, people's economic opportunities. It affects transportation. It cuts through everything. So if we could unwind the legacy that you were all talking about this morning of land use regulation used as an instrument of white supremacy and of structural racism, we would have the ability to address a lot of issues that are not directly related to race, that are really important to everyone who lives here and cares about this place.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, I think you've said it very well. And it seems to me that we are in a new era in Montgomery County, which is why, this is a very important issue for a position of, chair to really own. Sometimes I have shared with my colleagues and other people that I remember being asked a lot of questions about MS-13, and a former colleague saying, well, you're really passionate about this issue, you know a lot, and me saying, well, not really, I'm from Venezuela, and MS-13 was not a thing over there. I just did a lot of research because in this position of having to represent 200,000 residents and really the entire county, I have to take it upon myself to learn as much as I can about every corner and every segment of this community. That is my responsibility as an elected official, and I think in your position, I would submit to you that it's the same thing, especially when it comes to planning, because it is about people. And in a county now where I think 4 of the 5 council-managed districts are majority people of color, if the planning department, parks and planning is not led by somebody who absolutely is going to make a priority understanding the various needs, aspirations of every single corner of our community, then we're not going to be successful. And so that's why, for me, this is so important. And it is not only about, just focusing on the disparities. When we talk about diversity, usually I think we all kind of go to that direction. I myself don't take public transportation as much anymore. But I used to have to do that, not by choice. I just had to do that to go to work and to do many other things, right? So we can't just generalize and think that when we talk about diversity that it equates to a particular lifestyle or a particular income level. That's the beauty of this county. But I think that if we're going to be, honest about our responsibility as elected officials and in this particular position as chair, we're going to have to be take the responsibility of understanding that very extraordinary, complex web of who we are in the county. And we must do it in order to get the results that we need for everybody to succeed. So I really appreciate, you stepping up to reapply for this particular position. I have been very excited about the innovative ideas that your team has brought forth to us. I think they're right, spot on. I'm very excited about that. And I, really do look forward to seeing how we all can, again, in a very authentic way, incorporate all the voices. And there were no lights before I said that, but now there is a light. So, Councilmember Jawand.
As often, you inspire further discussion, Council President. Mr. Anderson, I won't be long. I wanted to say thank you for Mr. Anderson. I've been wanting to do that for a while. Andrew got it. Andrew got it. Matrix. Yeah. So my wife knows that for the millions watching at home, I quote movies a lot to interpret life, and so that was a veiled attempt. But you and I feel, have been having a conversation for a couple of years now about the very difficult and challenging and exciting job and opportunity we have here to make Montgomery County a place where everyone can live, work, play in an equitable way. And that's not an easy task, right? It's the task of all of us up here. It's the task of everyone who works for county government. It's the planning board, everyone else. And there's no easy answer, but I have come to respect your ability to think about other options, we all have our biases and our preferences and things that we default to, and I have been pleased with your ability to step out of that and hear other perspectives. I would agree with some of the things you're doing with parks activation and all the other things you're trying, and hopefully more things that we'll try to crack this nut. But one thing in particular I wanted to allow you to just say something briefly on is the challenge of striking that balance of putting enough, using the leverage we have here on the council and here in the planning board to get the best deal we can for our residents, and that tends to come in the when we're talking about zoning and affordable housing, but it's a lot. It manifests in a lot of other ways too. And so whether it's businesses that or retail, and I still struggle. I'm not dogmatic on this. I think you know that. I want to find the best way forward, and I just want to say, as you have a new member coming on, I think you'll be reappointed. I intend to support you, and just continue to try to push those boundaries of how do we get the best deal for our residents, and understanding what the council president said, which is very important. We can't get stuck in this typecast that everyone is going to do everything the same way for the whole time. Everyone's going to be in public transit or the whole time in their life. And I think that was a great example, and many people aspire to be in, a position where they don't have to do that every day because it's hard, having taken the bus with my mom for a long time. I know when she was able to get the 86 Corolla, she liked it. And while we want to encourage multimodal, we have to understand that people are coming from different places. And so whether it be affordable housing or transit or the land use, I just want to encourage and challenge you to continue to have an open mind and think outside the box and work with us that are also in good faith trying to figure these things out over time.
Well, I'll say I've really enjoyed getting to know you and having that conversation. And I think that on the Veers Mill plan, for example, I had shared with you that sometimes our ability, whether it may be at the planning staff level, maybe at the planning board level, we may not be able to really wrap it up in the way that we would like. Our tools are limited, and sometimes we have to work with you, and sometimes there is an element of politics, not in a negative sense, but in a very appropriate and positive sense, that the council can close a deal sometimes that we're unable to effectuate in our role in the process, and that's okay. And I think that where things landed with Veers Mill was really a great example of a very constructive relationship between the planning staff and board and the county council, and we wound up in a place that's really in the public interest.
All right, Mr. Anderson, I don't see any more lights. Calling once, calling twice. Thank you so much for, again, for reapplying, and we obviously will be, conducting our interviews, and then we'll have an opportunity to take our votes. But I got to tell you, I think that having continuity in terms of what you have already started is really important, and really do look forward to serving with you in the future as well.
Thanks very much.
All right, thank you. Okay, so now we will move on to Mr. Julian Hafner. Please here. Good afternoon. Mr. Hafner, so welcome, and there is a button at the base there of the microphone for you to activate it. There you go. I do have a number of questions, and I know that we have received your application. I know that you're applying for a position of board member. So I have some just standard questions, and then we'll open it up for a dialogue with colleagues. And at the end, if you have any closing remarks, et cetera, we'll definitely give you that opportunity. So to begin, why do you want to become a member of the planning board, and given your background and experience, what do you hope to accomplish as a member?
Well, first of all, thank you for granting this interview. The process has been, to say the least, informative and educational, and I'm glad I have embarked on this path. In answer to your question, I think that it's no surprise or it's no shock to anybody sitting here that this county is undergoing tremendous demographic shifts, right? We're getting younger, we're getting browner, we're getting less affluent. And with that brings a set of challenges that I think any governmental body needs to address. The planning board, sitting at where it sits, plays a critical role in ensuring that we respond to the challenges that are presented by these demographic shifts. Given my background, many of you I know from some of my political activities, a lot of what we've been doing has been focused on creating a more inclusive community here in Montgomery County, ensuring that folks believe that there is a place for them here and that they actually can thrive here. And that government is not for those people over there, but it's for us and of us and owned by us. And I think the planning board, to the extent that its decisions have profound implications in the lives of so many, can play a key role in creating that inclusive community. And I think given what I've done in the past, I think given my professional background as an attorney, I'm not a land use attorney, but I am an attorney, I think I sit in a very kind of privileged position that I can be the kind of ambassador I think that the planning board needs to certain segments of the community. So all of those things are kind of the impetus behind why I've submitted my name for this position.
Thank you. What societal changes are most likely to impact land use, and how should we respond? So for example, what changes should we make and how we zone for retail, since online shopping is changing the nature of retail and demand for in-store shopping?
Right. So I think the question suggests that that we need to address these changes, these shifts that are occurring. The thing that came to mind when I saw this question was adapt or die. Right. We need to adapt to sort of the reality that's being presented to us. So, for example, for certain spaces that are no longer viable or on the brink of obsolescence, let's think about different ways that we can kind of use that to as an opportunity to address some of the issues that we're having. For example, affordable housing, right? Maybe we can think about ways to reimagine certain uses for buildings that are no longer appropriate for the kind of retail that online is supplanting. But at the same time, we shouldn't be quick to, kind of sign the death certificate for retail. As a matter of fact, kind of coincidentally, I was talking to a developer in another county this morning at a breakfast who operates in the retail space, and he was boasting that he has a almost 100% occupancy rate, and that the online, the challenges presented by kind of online retail haven't quite hit them because they have been anticipating this and responding with appropriate kind of tenant mixes, responding with appropriate kind of retail that attracts folks, responding to the millennial need to kind of congregate in spaces that are offline but are not necessarily malls. So all that suggests to me that to the extent we adapt, we understand what's coming down the pike and adapt and respond, we're well positioned to do that. So I guess to summarize my statement, I would say understand what's coming, understand the need to adapt, be flexible enough to adapt, and then implement.
How would shifts in demographics, so both, diversity, aging population, millennials, affect the work of the planning department and Department of Parks?
Yeah, like I think I spoke before, it suggests that the way of doing business in the past is not necessarily what we need to do in the future. And I think we need to understand, again, what the challenges are, have people who are kind of on the ground appreciating, assessing those challenges, and who are set and committed to embracing the challenges and ensuring that Montgomery County is the place that we all know it to be, the place that drew us here to begin initially, and what's going to keep us here. So I think that would be my answer.
Okay. And so many pressing issues are regional in nature: transportation networks, economic growth, affordable housing, to name a few. How would you position the planning board to work on these larger regional issues?
Yeah, and I appreciate the question, because I believe that where we sit, we're necessarily a kind of three jurisdiction space, right? There's a lot of flexibility and fluidity between the jurisdictions, right? So I think that proceeding with that understanding, we need to adopt a kind of regional approach, and I think that we're well positioned. We have, the Council of Governments, we have WMATA. I think it's a matter of kind of aligning, or first identifying the interests, aligning the interests, and then figuring out how we can all kind of move in a direction that gets us where collectively we want to be, understanding that there are going to be competitive kind of pressures. Each jurisdiction is to a certain extent competing with the other. But I believe there's room for cooperation. For example, with the WMATA funding, and how three jurisdictions for the first time in history came together and created a funding source to ensure that this asset that benefits all of us is available, and it's quality for all of us. So I think kind of moving with that sort of philosophy, I think is where we should be. And if I were fortunate enough to be appointed to the board, I would bring that kind of regional outlook and look for opportunities to work across the aisle or across jurisdictions to figure out what that common vision might look like and how we might proceed collectively.
Are there any potential conflicts of interest of which we should be aware, and would you be able to make the time commitments required to fulfill the responsibilities of planning board member?
No conflicts I'm aware of. And yes, I will be able, given my kind of schedule now, it is quite flexible. And I've spoken with folks and about the need to perhaps have a schedule that accommodates the requirements of this position. And I've received assurances that it shouldn't be a problem, and to the extent that to my knowledge, it's not going to be a problem. So yes.
Okay, great. All right, Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Mr. Hafner, thank you so much for your willingness to serve in this role. I'm going to start off with an area that I think that you're familiar with, but as the District 2 representative, I'm very concerned about areas like Montgomery Village, an area that has not seen a lot of economic development, both from a housing standpoint as well as when it comes to commercial space, whether it's retail or other, and then also an area like Germantown that does have great suburban neighborhoods and some of the amenities, but certainly still hasn't seen the economic growth like we've seen in areas like Rockville that have much smaller populations, significantly smaller, tens of thousands smaller, and in an area like Damascus, a rural area, but still looking for that sort of economic development and to continue to make sure that they're not stagnating. So tell me a little bit about what your vision would be as a planning board member and what you see happening in those kinds of areas.
So as I'm sure the majority of you know, I'm a resident of Gaithersburg. I reside in the Up County, and I'm familiar with the challenges that living in Up County presents, namely the traffic. So one of my visions for the Up County is creating viable transit options for folks who live here. And I'm not necessarily in one camp or the other in terms of public transit versus roads. I think we need to find the optimal mix, and so I'm willing to be flexible enough to consider various options when it comes to transit. Another kind of opportunity I think we have in the Up County is that it's probably one of the faster growing areas in the county, and definitely one of the more diverse areas of the county. I think to the extent we focus on ensuring that there are meaningful kind of economic development options up county, we can go a long way in kind of presenting this vision of a more inclusive Montgomery County. I think, for example, kind of how the building moratorium in the East County kind of stagnated things and lent itself to this perception that Montgomery County wasn't necessarily inclusive or wasn't necessarily interested in ensuring that certain populations progress. I think to the extent we kind of focus and train our focus on the Up County, we have an opportunity to dispel those kinds of myths and create the kind of, again, inclusive communities that I think we all are striving towards. Another thing I think we should think about when we're talking about the Up County is ensuring that there are meaningful kind of economic development opportunities in terms of jobs. I know a lot of the reason that we have traffic is because there aren't meaningful employment opportunities up county. I think planning can play a role in ensuring that we do locate good jobs in the Up County that wouldn't necessitate, having to take car trips, and that would integrate transportation options that would allow folks to either walk or take some sort of transit to those job centers. So that's kind of my vision for the Up County.
Councilmember Friedson.
How are you?
Doing
Thanks
well,
for your willingness to serve. And some of the magic is taken out of my magic wand question since I've already asked it. But I said that I'll ask it to everybody. So you had a couple more minutes to consider it than Mr. Anderson did. But if you had a magic wand and you could make any change, large or small, in Montgomery County, what would it be?
Yeah, I think my magic wand change would be to kind of make the work that I'm doing instantaneous in terms of dispelling the myth that there's no place for folks of color here, or that the system here is tilted against people of color. I don't believe that, and I would if I could wave my magic wand, I would ensure that thought was done away with. I believe that we have tremendous opportunity here in Montgomery County. I wouldn't be here otherwise. And I believe that we have tremendous talent that, for whatever reason, at times goes untapped. I don't want to see any talent wasted, and I don't want to see any dreams deferred. That would be my magic wish for Montgomery County.
Thank you.
Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Julian. Thank you for applying. We've known each other for years. We've had many good conversations. Absolutely. But one of the things that I guess I don't know about you is, and you said you don't do land use law, but one of the things I don't know about you is whether or not you've actually ever been involved in any type of land use or development in Montgomery County, and if you have, what worked, what didn't work, and if you haven't, if you can think of some other place where in Montgomery County which you would have thought worked or didn't work.
So I haven't necessarily in my practice done land use. I was associated with a firm that has a land use practice and worked on tangentially maybe 2 or 3 matters in the 4-5 years collectively that I was at the firm. So I can't represent that I do land use.
Right.
To the extent that I've been involved in some of these land use or some of the issues of the planning board, I was kind of instrumental at the beginning, the nascent, the outset of the Macedonia Baptist Church issue. They'd reached out and wanted some support, and I helped them frame their issues with respect to the asks and what they were looking for. That was, I think, kind of opened my eyes to what the board does and the potential that the board can have in kind of facilitating this relationship between certain communities that deem themselves kind of outside. But in terms of kind of heavy lifting land use issues, I've not. But I will tell you that I don't think that that's necessarily a negative to the extent that I come to this as a kind of open or tabula rasa, and willing to learn, but always guided by certain principles. The need to ensure that we are inclusive, the need to ensure that we have affordable housing, that we preserve the affordable housing that we have, and also the need to kind of dispel the myth that Montgomery County is not open for business. A lot of what I've done outside of politics is trying to galvanize the voice of particularly small businesses and let them know that, closed mouths don't get fed, and that they have real and real concerns, and that government will respond to the extent they know what the problems are. So I think that the work on the board can kind of further the work that I've already done in that respect.
Thank you very much, Julian. Good seeing you.
Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. Hey, Julian.
How are you?
Can you comment on how you see, the planning board often has to balance the desire of communities to see development or redevelopment of older communities, to get new community assets, with the need for school capacity and for us to maintain adequate public facilities, and attempts to strike a balance. How do you look at that question? Are our current policies too rigid, too flexible, somewhere in the middle, somewhat case by case? How do you look at
I think the adequate facilities ordinances have their place. They need to be in place, right? We don't need to encourage development where there's no infrastructure to accommodate that development. So I think that they work, and I wouldn't want to necessarily see them overturned in any type of dramatic way. So I do take to heart the school capacity issues. In Gaithersburg alone, I think we have an inordinate amount of kind of over capacity schools, right? And the needs are real, and we should address those. But at the same time, we have competing issues with, we need to accommodate this growing population. So a lot of what I see we're doing on the planning board is kind of balancing kind of real and that's what I'm looking for, worthy kind of competing interests. And again, like I said, to the extent my North Star, my guiding kind of principles are, inclusion and affordable housing, I think that we can strike the appropriate balances. So again, I'm not kind of either on either side, but I am kind of, I am guided by, my core beliefs. So.
Thanks. Can you comment on the role of the planning board at addressing income and wealth disparities and the jobs disparities between the east side and the west side of the county in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the planning board plays a key role in ensuring in where we live, where we work, and kind of how we play. And I think that we need to ensure that we, again, speaking to Councilmember Rice's question, that we locate jobs where the people are, that we locate transit, or we locate jobs where they're transit accessible. And I think obviously the role the board plays is critical in that respect. So I believe that's where we I think it's a critical role that the board plays, and I'd be kind of definitely willing to ensure that the board moves with those kinds of goals in mind.
Thanks.
That makes sense.
And finally, you mentioned many of us know you through your political activities, you said. Obviously, I think the county benefits from having for decades what we see as a non-political planning board. Is it your intention, if you're appointed, to serve out all 4 years and not to run for office in that time?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. All right, well, Mr. Hefner, we really appreciate you applying for this very important post. We do have 2 more days, well, 1 more day of interviews, both morning and afternoon, and then we will be making a decision.
Absolutely.
So we really do appreciate
Thank you so much.
taking the time. Thank you so much. And with that, colleagues, we are adjourned.